Hey, welcome back, fellow scientists. So just really quickly, some programming administrative notes. Number one, you'll notice this little picture down here may look a little bit different. And that's because I'm in my office hours for Wednesday. I'm filming this Wednesday afternoon at 1:43 p.m. And as you can see, it's just me. So I had office hours last week and no one showed up, and I'm having office hours this week and no one's showing up. So I'm not exactly sure if it's working correctly or if people just don't have questions or don't want to use the office hours. So just help me do a function check. You're going to be watching this on Thursday. So find how to access my Thursday office hours. And if you can do that, and if you can show up, and maybe we chat for like 2 or 3 minutes, how things are going, what you're looking forward to in the summer, uh, whatnot. Will That'll be extra credit for you. So help me see that this works. And if it doesn't work, then that's good information, and I can fix that. But if it does work, then I can just rest assured that I'm doing my job and no one has questions. So, anyways, and also I'm going to use this for my little picture-in-picture right here, which is a really helpful tool because with the other software, I couldn't see this box, and so I would write behind it or I would write on top of it, or it just yeah it doesn't work. But now I can see it, and so that's helpful for me. So that's great. But enough about me. Let's talk about you guys. So this is going to be the last unit of our school year. It's chapter 9, the endocrine system, and chapter 16, the reproductive system. I did send a letter home to your parents, just kind of like alerting them to the fact that we're going to be talking about hormones and sexual reproduction, because some parents have very specific views on that, and some parents are like, yeah, whatever. Uh, so we want to kind of find a balance between those two. I want you to go into adult life, and most of you are going to be married statistically at some point in your life. I want you guys to go into married life knowing about this topic. So we're just going to dive right in. Blank notes are on OneNote. We will be having a lot of diagram quizzes for this material. There'll be open note, there'll be open book. I won't be providing my notes for you, but I'm going to trust that you're going to take notes on the blank notes that I provided on OneNote. So I'm using last year's copies just so that I can save time and not have to write things down, but we can just go as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So we're just going to dive right in. So chapter 9, endocrine system, is the other command and control system, right? We talked about the nervous system. That's what most people think is the primary command and control system. But then the endocrine system is kind of like the younger brother, the sibling, or the redheaded stepchild, if you will, command and control system. It's not as well known. People don't really like to talk about it, but it's there. Redheads unite, right? So, anyways, how do we compare the two command and control systems? So, this is the nervous system command and control system. This is like hardwire. This is like those phones that everyone used to have that like hung on the wall and then had the little spiral cord that kind of came out of that. Or if you still have cable, right? It's like cable. There's an actual cable that's running along the power lines and then goes underground and then goes to a box in your house, and there's actual cables that go through your walls and then come out and connect to the TV. So nervous system is hardwired electrical impulses. It sends signals really fast, and it's like really in charge. It's the main boss. Here, the endocrine system, which deals with hormones, is more like a wireless network, right? So you got some cells which we're gonna that are in endocrine glands, which we're gonna talk about, and they make these things called hormones, which could be either lipids or proteins. We'll talk about that here in a second. But then these hormones, they are sent into the blood, right? And then they diffuse all throughout the whole entire body, everywhere blood goes, which is everywhere in the body, right? And some hormones will affect many different types of cells, like your thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. They regulate metabolism, and so that's going to affect most cells, right? Some hormones are just going to affect a small amount of cells, like oxytocin, for instance, just affects the uterus during childbirth for contractions. But it still goes all throughout the blood. It goes to every single cell, but the cell can only react to that hormone if it has this specific hormone receptor. So you can see here, right, this is kind of like the router that sends out the signal. The signal is the hormone. And then only if you have the password or the valid, IP address, or you techies are probably making fun of me right now because I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just throwing terms out there. But anyways, only if you have the right stuff can you actually receive that signal and do something with that signal, right? This is a receptor molecule on the plasma membrane of a cell. We'll talk later on about a receptor molecule that's inside the cell. So just know that it can be on the surface or it can be inside the cell, but the cell has to have that receptor molecule to be able to respond to that hormone or to be able to be changed by that hormone. All right, so hormones, let's define them. Chemicals that travel through the bloodstream to regulate metabolic activity. What do I mean by metabolic activity? Well, metabolism is simply building up and breaking down, right? So there's metabolism, there's catabolism, there's anabolism, all of that, right? Catabolism and anabolism. Catabolic, right? We're destroying, we're tearing down. Anabolic, we're building up, right? All of that is metabolic activity. All that is metabolism. So it doesn't matter whether we're breaking down or building up. It's all metabolism. So two different classes of hormones. First class is steroid hormones, right? So steroid hormone, you hear steroid, think lipid, right? Think cholesterol, think testosterone, think estrogen, right? All of those are steroids. All of those are lipid based. And so these hormones, well, all hormones, in fact, they work by turning on or off a gene, right? Just like a light switch, right? A gene can be on, okay? So it can be making RNA, right, which makes protein, and then the protein, you remember from regular biology, is the worker, so that does stuff, right? That's if the gene is on, right, like the light switch, or the gene could be off, right, like the light switch, in which case the DNA is just kind of sitting there and it's not making mRNA and it's not making protein, and because there's no protein, then that protein isn't doing anything, right? And so you'll notice down here I reference central dogma biology because you need to remember that for this to make sense. DNA to RNA to protein to you. All right, now also remember back from regular biology is that the cell membrane is made of phospholipids. So if it's a lipid-based hormone or if it's a lipid-soluble hormone, it can just go right through the cell membrane. The receptor protein is on the inside of the cell. So then this hormone bonds to this receptor protein. It changes shape. It's going to change function. So this used to be inactive, but then the hormone bonds to it, and now it's active, and it migrates to the DNA, and it stimulates the DNA to make mRNA. It would be a transcription factor. If you guys remember, those of you that have taken AP biology, right, that was a big thing in gene regulation. How do you decide when to make a protein, when to turn on a gene, or when to not make a protein, when to turn off a gene, right? So that would be a transcription factor that makes mRNA, makes protein. So lipid soluble hormones, they just go right through the cell membrane, and their receptor is inside the cell. We also have non-steroid or non-lipid soluble. So these are big, gigantic, clunky proteins, right? And so for this one, the receptor protein has to be on the cell membrane. So here we have our hormone, our messenger, and then that's going to bond to this, and then that's going to bond to that, and that's going to bond to that, and then we're going to have some effect kind of inside the cell that's gonna in this case start a signaling cascade, or turn on a gene or turn off a gene or whatnot. So just remember those two basic classes of hormones. We have our lipid hormones, which go right through the cell membrane and activate the protein inside the cell, and then we have our non-lipid hormones, or our water-soluble hormones, which can't get through, and so their receptor proteins are on the cell surface, and then they do have an effect inside, but the hormones themselves don't go inside the cell. All right, sweet. So next question, what triggers the release of hormones? Well, a couple things. Number one, we can have changing levels of things that our body keeps track of. So we can have changing levels of ions, or we can have changing levels of nutrients, right? If you just got finished eating like an amazing, I don't know, ice cream sundae, right? There's a lot of sugar circulating through your blood, and your pancreas needs to release insulin to get that sugar out of your blood and into your cells. Otherwise, bad things happen. Number two, the second thing that triggers the release of hormones is the nervous system, right? So the nervous system can actually stimulate glands. So your adrenal glands, right, is one of the things that's stimulated by your nervous system to produce epinephrine or adrenaline, as it's more commonly known. So your nervous system can actually tell glands to produce hormones. And then, weirdly, right, the hormones can tell glands to produce other hormones, right? If it were me designing it, praise the Lord that I didn't, because then we would not be fearfully and wonderfully made. But if it were me designing it, I would just have the nervous system, right, tell the glands to produce their hormones. But God, in His infinite wisdom, decided to have the hypothalamus, which is a gland of the endocrine system, tell the anterior pituitary, which is another gland of the endocrine system, to produce its hormones. And then the anterior pituitary hormones, they're going to tell another gland, another gland to produce their hormones. And then their hormones, they're going to go out and they're going to actually do like the job that they want to, or that God designed them to do. So those three things trigger the release of hormones. That's good background information to know. All right, and now this will be kind of the last slide where we stop, and we'll have a quiz on these diagrams rather on Monday. Right, so you're watching this on Thursday, so we're going to have a quiz on this on Monday. So we're going to start up top here in the brain with a pineal gland. Right, number one is pointing to that little pea-sized thing right there. By the way, next week, Tuesday and Thursday, we'll go into all the hormones that these release and all their functions and everything like that. You'll get to at least write those down. I would say that you'll get to memorize them, but the quizzes are open note and open book, so you don't have to memorize them, I guess. But anyways, I digress. Number one is the pineal gland. Number two is the hypothalamus. So we already learned about that, right, with our nervous system and the parts of the brain. So just kind of remember that. Number three is the pituitary. So that's this little hangy down thing right here. And if we zoom in on this, it's actually made of two parts. And this is something that you really, really need to know, because the anterior pituitary, right, close to the front of the body, right, is different and has different functions from the posterior pituitary, which is kind of close to the back of your head, right? Remember anterior, posterior, right? Remember BFAP? Haha, how many of you almost did yeah, right, exactly. So BFAP, right? Anatomical position, anterior, posterior, superior, inferior, all that sort of stuff. It all comes back, even here in this last unit. All right, so pineal, hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, we haven't talked about, right? But that's kind of sitting around the windpipe. You can actually feel it. Is if you have your hand on your Adam's apple, it feels like kind of that meaty thing that slides up and down as you swallow. On the back of the thyroid, right? So here's the thyroid. On the back of the thyroid, you have your parathyroid glands, which there's an interesting story as to how people figured out that those were actually different glands that do different things, because it just looks like it's part of the thyroid, but it's not. So thyroid, parathyroid, thymus, which we already talked about in our immune system. So you guys already know that. So that's done. Adrenal glands, they sit right atop your kidneys, right? And so adrenal glands actually have two different parts. Let me move this out of the way real quick. So there's the adrenal cortex, which is the outside of the adrenal glands. And then there's the adrenal medulla, which is the inside of the adrenal glands. So those are things just like the anterior and posterior pituitary. Those are things that you need to know, because they do different things. They produce different hormones. Pancreas, part of the digestive system, also part of the endocrine system, because it does release hormones. And then, of course, we have our ovaries and our females, right? This is, of course, the scientific notation for female, right? And then we have our testes in our males, or testis rather, because this is a singular. Testes would be plural. So anyways, I believe that is it. Yep, because then we go into actual glands and actually what their hormones produce and what they do. So this has been Mr. Leo. This has been our introduction to the endocrine system. You learned just basic classes of hormones and what triggers hormone release. And then hopefully you also learned the glands of the endocrine system. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you on the flip side.